Welcome back. You're watching our continuing coverage. We are counting down to the budget. 30 minutes to go for the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to rise to present her 8th budget. It is a record number of consecutive budgets delivered by a Finance Minister. We're here at the Confederation of Indian Industry. Joining me now, Sanjiv Puri, Chatterjee and Rajiv Memani. Gentlemen, good morning. Many thanks for joining us. Sanjiv Puri, let me start by asking you, CapEx, consumption, consolidation, what will the Finance Minister prioritize?
I think very clearly, like has been in the past, I think the focus will remain on inclusive and sustainable growth, and that growth through improving productivity of the economy, investments in the economy through public capex. And given the softness in consumption, we do believe there will be some relief provided to middle class by way of either income tax or reduction in duties on, petroleum and so on and so forth. So we expect a combination of that, but the thrust of earlier budgets of increasing competitiveness of the economy, the productive capacity, I think that will certainly continue.
On consumption, Sanjiv, and I based this on the question and the comment that came in from the Economic Affairs, the Chief Economic Advisor in his interview with me, when I asked him that how concerned is he about consumption, and he said that, look, we don't believe it's a structural problem. Rural economy has started to show signs of picking up, and we have seen a revival there. Urban is hurting at this point in time, but we don't believe that the consumption issues are a structural problem today. How do you look at the situation?
You see, ultimately, I think consumption is under pressure because of cost of certain items, particularly, the food inflation has been sticky, and that's so because of climate change. And because of that, I think the wallets are stretched. The other thing that stretched the wallets is the higher interest rates. There's a study published also which shows the share of EMI in a consumer's wallet has actually gone up. So there is stress, and that's why I think we are seeing consumption being a little soft. Once these factors are dealt with, and we do expect the interest rates also to moderate in February. Yeah, of course, that has to be preceded by liquidity injection, which has started to happen. Yeah. And both of this should provide relief, and I think some relief in the form of income tax or petroleum products. That will provide the.
But any indication of volume growth picking up? And we certainly saw that with Nestle's numbers yesterday. Any indication of volume growth picking up?
Well, rural is doing picking up. Rural is picking up, but urban is still flattish. That's the general sense we have.
Urban flattish at this point in time. Chatterjee, the bucket man, returns here on CNBC-TV18. How many buckets do you have for us? 7 buckets.
I prepared them because I knew you'd be pulling my leg. So I said Shireen's going to say that.
It is tradition. We can't let go of it.
Yeah. Anyway, I have 7, but I'll concentrate on the top 2. If there's time, I'll run through the balance 5. The real issue before the budget, Shireen, is the tension between controlling the glide path of fiscal deficit versus using infrastructure outlays to pump prime the economy. This is the ultimate tension in the budget.
Yeah.
Now, the real question is, where is the Honorable Finance Minister putting her finger on this continuum?
Yeah.
Now, last year was a disappointment because after many years of 30% growth in the infra outlay budgets, if you remember the past years, 5 lakh to 7.5, 7.5 to 10, they were all 30% increases. Last year, we got only 10% growth. 10 became 11.1. Now, this year, what is the range within which she can play? I mean, if it's going to be as conservative as last year, then we are not going to get infra to pump prime the economy and the slowdown and the capex. And if you get only 10%...
But the government's point of view is that that's not conservative, that is still a pretty high capex number, and it's now time for the private sector to also pick up the baton.
Well, government expenditure in infra leads private capex there. So the government, and remember, the government itself is touting the figure that 1 rupee spent on infrastructure results in 3 rupees of GDP, and 1 rupee spent on direct benefit transfer kind of expenditures results in 90 paisa of GDP. So the maths is very clear. If you want infra to pump prime the economy, particularly now when there already talk of slowdown in capex, slowdown in GDP, then where are we going to see the FM put her finger? If she's going to be aggressive and go for a 25% increase in the infra outlay, then we are going to get 14 lakh crores as the budgetary outlay over 11.1 last year. And if she's going to be conservative, then we are going to get 12 lakh crores. So I'm keen to see where the government takes a stand. And the second point, and I'm going to stop very quickly after mentioning this, last time there was a hint in her budget speech. She said that the core infrastructure areas have reached a certain level of maturity and self-sustainability, which is largely transport and energy. And that, she said, other sectors of the economy now require attention. So I'm also keen to see in her budget announcements this time the interplay of the outlays between core and social infrastructure. And social meaning health, education, agriculture. I'm stopping here. The balance 5, if we have time.
Yeah, I'll come to you very quickly for the balance 5 in just a second. But 12 to 14 lakh crores, that's the range that you're working with this time around as far as capex is concerned. On the tax front, you know, if she needs to deliver on the range that Vinay Chatterjee has just articulated, how much room does she have to do more than just provide sweeteners on the tax front?
Yeah, on the tax front, my view is that at least on the personal tax side, you know, last 3 years, Shireen, the growth in personal tax revenues has been more than 20%. So at least on the personal tax side, and if you have to provide some fillip to consumption, and also from an equity standpoint, given the way lower income and middle income people have been hit because of inflation and other things, I think the government should provide relief at those levels. So I do believe that the government will be providing relief. What's the extent of relief? I think that we'll have to see. And you're right. I think that the fiscal glide path has to be maintained.
But do you think that they'll move on the rate and the slab, or do you think that will be more by way of exemptions?
No. I think they will go with the new tax scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. On the new tax scheme, bring in exemptions, or do you think that move as far as the rates slabs are concerned?
No, there are 3 levers. Either there is the tax rebate, so you can move that up. Standard deduction, then that impacts everything. Or you move the slab up, that the peak rate, which comes at 15 lakhs, you know, that moves up slightly. So I don't know which they'll apply, but my sense is that the rebate amount that is there, they may increase that. Because that gives relief at that level, and a little bit increase on the standard deduction side, because they won't want to tamper anything that changes with the number of people who are filing tax returns, because that's been one of the reasons that they want to track that number very closely.
On the corporate side, you know, we saw changes as far as capital gains were concerned. The expectation is that given where the markets are, you know, maybe they might provide a fillip by a cut. Do you expect that at all?
No. It may happen.
STT,
I don't expect
anything?
I don't expect. I think also if you see, Shireen, this government, they have not made too many, if I compare them with the earlier budgets, where you used to have lots of changes in tax. Now you have limited issues, so the direction is pretty clear in the way they want to go at it. So I don't anticipate too many changes. I do hope that they present the new tax draft income tax act to be, you know, opened up for discussion, and also be probably to put place in front of the standing committee. And then you know, that will lead to real simplification. So a lot of the tax issues may be around simplification. And on corporate tax side.
That's the indication. But you know, on this business of the global context and responding to the global context under Trump administration, the threat of tariffs today is probably going to be the day where we see the first set of tariffs being imposed on Canada, Mexico, and perhaps even China. But Sanjiv Puri, from a manufacturing standpoint, from an FDI standpoint, what's the expectation, not just in terms of signaling, but also in terms of tangible steps? What do you expect?
So, you know, this is a very difficult situation in the global context today. And therefore, we have to put in a lot more focus on the domestic drivers of competitiveness, which is what the Chief Economic Advisor also alluded to. So focus on competitiveness on sectors where we can really win and become a global hub. Second is, I think, this business of tariffs, or the complicated tariff walls that are emerging. This has been happening in the past, and we are seeing more of it happen. So really, we will have to really progress on FTAs. I think that's the way out, and use that route to integrate with global value chains. And the third is, I think, you know, while it's not to do with tariffs, but there's also an issue of excess capacities in certain geographies that are dumping stocks all over, and therefore limiting opportunities. So we have to deal with that unfair competition. We need to have an agile response. So really in 3 parts. I think one is to focus on sectors where we have potential, where the world has potential, and some of it we spoke about also yesterday. Second is FTAs, and third is really to have agile responses to these issues of dumping. That's very, all these three are critical for
Anything
manufacturing.
specific on the Make in India agenda, bringing back the concessional scheme for new manufacturing units, perhaps some allowances even for corporates to expand existing units and so on and so forth? Anything there on Make in India 3.0?
So look, anything concessional is always welcome by industry.
But is that,
I'll really, if I was to really put it down, let me say that the balance sheets of corporates, the balance sheets of the financial system, they're in strong position, right? Corporate income tax rates were rationalized in the past. I think the big things to deal with right now are ease of doing business, cost of doing business, flexibility in labor regulations. A lot of it fall in this, in the ambit of the state. It's to provide specific targeted impetus to sectors that are labor intensive. See how we can pump prime agriculture even further. And this is the sector that the economic survey spoke about.
Absolutely.
To deal with the issue of resilience, because that feeds into inflation and then consumption.
It's interesting to see the mood here in industry is measured and tempered when it comes to things like, reductions or allowances or further incentives to India Inc. And that's because the survey made it clear corporate profitability has been at a 15-year high. But of course, the situation is looking a little bit more challenging now in terms of that, but a measured response. One final bucket before I let you go, and we'll toss it back to Bombay. Vinayak.
Final bucket would be a policy statement, long overdue, of a reduction of the 28% GST on an Aam Aadmi product called cement, which everybody considers irrational.
But it cannot be part of the budget. So
no, it can be part of a budgetary policy announcement. It's going to spur cost effectiveness in infrastructure. It will help Aam Aadmi, and it cannot be equated with pan masala, cement.
No. And there's a lot in that 28% bucket that needs to be addressed, but the budget perhaps is not going to veer into the GST territory at all. That will be for the GST Council. But gentlemen, we will check back in with you on how much of this is actually delivered by the Finance Minister. As always, many thanks for joining us here at the CNBC-TV18 Budget Headquarters. Guys, it's back to you.
All right,